Hello everybody, how's it going? Ben Gothard here with another Project Egg interview. And today we're talking to Jack Dawhra from Afghanistan. How you doing, brother?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for asking. So let's jump right in with this interview. And my first question for you, Jack, is what is your story?
Hmm. That's very interesting. I actually did a talk the other day, and it was about legacy, leaving a legacy, and that was in London, close to Oxford Street, and that really sort of had all my story in it. And what actually happened was I moved from my parents really moved from Afghanistan to India, sort of when I was like 2 years old. I moved to London when I was about 19 years old, so came as an immigrant. And when I got here, all I'd done was I'd done my schooling. I had no degree. I had no, not gone to university. So I went through many, many jobs. But I had actually joined my family business at the age of 14. So I joined my family business in Delhi, that's in India, when I was 14. And I learned quite a bit from there. So I was with my father for about 4 years. We were running a sort of a substantially big business there. But I was still very naive, I can say, sort of ignorant at that point of time in my life. And when I moved to London, I really, really struggled initially. Went through many, many jobs. I actually remember in the first 2 years, I went through 18 jobs. 18. That's in less than 2 years. And then I went on to start my own business. Um, and Initially in the first sort of about 4 or 5 businesses, most of them really failed. Um, I don't call it fail now. When I look at it's a hindsight, I look at it as a learning curve. But the first few businesses really, really failed, and I got to a point where I was, emotionally down. I was financially down. I was almost suicidal at one point. Uh, you know, and I remember standing on a bridge one day, thinking of committing suicide. Um, and I still don't know why I actually moved away from that bridge. And I decided from that day, I said, I'm gonna make things happen. That's when I was almost 25 years old. Um, and I think it's the belief and the conviction level that I had at that point. Some sort of light, maybe some sort of hope that brought me out of that. And I started to work on my own business. Built that business by the age of 30. That business was doing £1 million in revenue. I had a team of about 25, 26 people working for me. I sold that business sort of, yeah, no, I wasn't even 30. I was actually 32, 33 at that time. I sold that back in 2014, that business, and then moved on from there. But it's been certainly an amazing ride. Um, I've had my, I've been to a point in my life where I woke up one day and I didn't have enough money for my breakfast. I've seen a day like that, and I think it's looking at hindsight. It's only when you get to that point in life, it's what brings you up. You have that drive within you to bring you up. So sometimes really going down, either financially or emotionally, can actually be beneficial. It can actually motivate. It can actually be a sort of a really sort of a motivating factor. It can really, really drive you because you don't want to get to that point in your life. Uh, and Yeah, so yeah, I mean, like I said, I got to that point where when I tell the story about me getting to that point when I woke up one day and I didn't have enough money for breakfast, it just makes me cry, especially when you're actually in a country like in a city like London, um, and getting to a point where I was suicidal and then being able to come out of it. It's been an amazing journey, but at the same time, um, uh, it's made me into a person where uh, nothing can break me. Um, I can face anything in my life, any sort of ups and downs or whatever happens in my life. It's just made me so strong. Um, so I'm actually glad that I had, it's like a blessing in disguise, really, to be going through any tough time. So any of you listening to this, I can tell you, if you're going through a tough time, it's most likely blessing in disguise. It's just there to teach you something. The question for all of us is, are we really, really learning? That's all it is. And if you're learning, you're not failing, because that's all it is. So yeah, that was an amazing ride. We sold the business back in 2014, and when I sold the business, I really didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. I just didn't know. And in the meantime, simultaneously, when I was running my business, I was getting my academic qualifications as well. So I did a finance diploma, I did a consulting diploma. I ended up doing my degree, honors in leadership and management. So this was all simultaneously. I was doing it because I was really driven. And I got married as well. I have a daughter, 21 months old daughter. She's a handful at the moment. But yeah, it's definitely been an amazing ride. When I sold the business, I was actually suggested by my partner, my missus, that I think you are better going into consulting because you're good at operations. So I was very good operationally running any business. So from there on, I thought, okay, let me try and see if consulting is going to work for me. And at the moment, I do mentoring, which is almost like another word for consulting, you can say, and provide sales and leadership training to different companies, entrepreneurs. That's one business. And then I have a couple of other businesses. I'm into property investment as well. At the same time, I have another project that I'm working on, which is a transport business into supercars like Ferraris, Lamborghinis. So we're planning on that. That's on the planning stages, very initial stages at the moment. But yeah, just been an amazing ride. That's me.
Wow, that's incredible, Jack. And I want to thank you for being so genuine and transparent with your story. I know sometimes those things can be difficult to talk about. So I want to dive a little bit more into your history. So you said from I believe age 2 you started living in India.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So can you maybe talk about when you moved there and how you dealt with that transition, and what that time period of living in India, how that really affected you and has come to build your character to what it is today?
That's a very interesting question. The first memory that I have is not really Afghanistan, because at the age of 2, I obviously wouldn't remember anything. So my first memory really is going to school in India, and looking at it's all hindsight, obviously, but looking back at it, I think everything happens for a reason. We lived in a very small city initially, and then went on to then actually at that point my father used to go back and forth to Afghanistan to obviously do his business, and when I was almost sort of 9 or 10 years old, that's when my father really completely moved. But my siblings and my mom, we used to live in India, and then we actually moved at the age of 9. We moved to Delhi. And I remember, and I'll tell you back and forth, when I moved to London, I actually went back to Delhi, and I went back to those streets where I lived my teenage. And it's a saying that where you live your teenage is who you really are. And when I went back to those streets to where I grew up in Delhi, it wasn't the most affluent area. Let's put it this way. It wasn't. So when I look at all the struggles that I went through, and I went back to those streets, I kind of realized that I hope I'm answering this question in the right way in the first place. But when I went back to those streets, it made me realize the reason behind all those failures, or you can say learning curves. That doesn't really matter, but it made me realize why I was failing, because I wasn't learning from the right people. I was living at a place where it wasn't as people are not really wealthy, or they were not the learners, or they were not the most driven people on the planet, we can say. But one thing that I did learn, and one of the driven factors in my life, has been my father. He was always into business. He was always driven. We are 4 siblings. I'm the youngest one, And he was always sort of very driven. He's not an educated person. He grew up in Afghanistan. He's lived most of his life in Afghanistan. But he always, managed to, run a business, have food on the table, and get us education. So that wasn't really a problem. So when I used to look at my father, my dad, that was a motivating factor for sure, because I always saw him working. I never remember seeing him at home in the daytime. He would come home 9, 10 o'clock at night, leave early mornings. So that was a sort of impression that I always had on my mind. But I wasn't really learning enough because of various factors, obviously. But when I obviously went through, joining my father's business at the age of 14, and I was with him for about a little over 4 years, that was really a good learning time for me, because at that time my father was doing well as well. He was doing well, but I remember at that point, one day, my father had to go somewhere to a meeting, and I went to the office, and we had to fill an order. And that was a very, very big order. That was like a substantial order to fill in this sort of a 10-hour period that we had. And I ended up filling that order. And I remember this was 11 o'clock at night. My father walked into the warehouse, and he just looked at me. And this is Delhi in the month of June and July. This is 47, 48 degrees Celsius. There was no light, no fans, nothing at all. We were all sweating. There's a team of almost 20 people packing stuff. But we managed to do it by the end of the day. This was 11 o'clock at night. We managed to load the whole, So these are all the memories that I have. And the transition is that, I looked at my father as a hardworking person. I think that's something that sort of almost in my DNA, a sort of a hardworking person that I've always been. So yeah, that was the first initial period.
So can you talk a little bit about the type of business that your family business was?
My father was into clothing business initially when he was in Afghanistan, but when he moved to India, we actually went into export business. We used to export to Russia, specifically to Tashkent. And then we used to export to Afghanistan as well, because he knew the Afghan market. He was exporting from India to Afghanistan. And the stuff we were exporting was, artificial jewelry mainly, and a bit on the clothing side as well. So raw clothes. So basically, you see a T-shirt that you are wearing. This is a cloth that's exported from some Asian country to another. This was what we were exporting as well. So raw cloth itself, and artificial jewelry to sunglasses to, pens and, bits and pieces like that. But some of these things were, at one point I remember peppermint we were exporting to Afghanistan. So yeah, the different items depending on the season, depending on the profit margins, but export business was.
Very cool, very cool. So, you were talking a little bit about how you recognized that one of the reasons that you were having some failures or setbacks in your own entrepreneurial journey was because you hadn't learned from the right people, at least to some degree. So,
yes,
so can you talk about how important that is to surround yourself with the right people, and maybe give people some actionable steps and advice on how to do that?
I have a mantra, and I think you must have heard this, and a lot of people hear this, but they don't really, it's a different thing reading something and hearing something, but really applying that to your life. You are the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's almost unbelievable when you actually apply. And when I say the 5 people that you surround yourself with, strangely enough, that actually also means your family. So, and not just surrounding yourself with people who are self-inspired or who are driven, but people with different qualities. Someone who is really driven, someone who's creative, someone who is technically very good, someone who is funny. Okay, so different people, but all motivated people for sure. Because there's a saying in Indian languages, actually, maybe in English as well. I don't know that, but if you put one stale piece of fruit in a big bunch of fresh fruit, the rest of them will get stale before you know it. And the same applies to humans as well. So you could potentially have 10 people you surround yourself with that are fantastic, really inspired. But if you have one person that's dragging you down, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So as much as it's important to surround yourself with the right people, it's actually more important to stay away from negative people. And that unfortunately includes family members. And it's one of the most difficult things to deal with. And I remember actually making a live video on Facebook quite some time ago. And it was actually it actually went a bit viral because of the subject sensitivity of the subject. That I said that not just staying away from negative people, that also includes your family members. So it's a difficult thing to do, and the action steps, you really just have to be very, very conscious you spend your time with. I normally tend to have a schedule that I work along with. There are times when I would have emergencies and I cannot go ahead with the schedule. There are times like that in any entrepreneurial journey, but at the same time, stick to your schedule. Schedule, and anything that gets scheduled gets done. If you don't schedule it, it never gets done. If you don't schedule it, you might as well not write it in your to-do list. That's how simple it is. So really actionable steps is to consciously focus. And if you don't consciously focus, to surround yourself with the right people, and not just surround yourself with the right people, you have to carry on finding better and better people to surround yourself with. There's a saying, and this is a saying by Robin Sharma. I don't know if you know Robin Sharma, the writer of Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And he says, if you are the smartest person in the room, find a different room. If you are, it's very simple. So not just that you surround yourself with the right people and people who are self-motivated and inspired, you have to keep changing them with time. You have to keep changing them with time, because there are always times when you may have a mentor, but you get to a point where you actually surpass the wisdom of that mentor. So you may have to go and find yourself another mentor. So same applies to people around you. If you are surrounded with someone who may be wise but not prepared to grow further, you may have to pass on and find someone who motivates you more, and not just motivates you more, but helps you think bigger, have a bigger vision. Because I think the biggest problem in the world is people just don't think big enough. It's something that I remember reading a long time ago in the book of Donald Trump. Funny enough, not that I'm a very big fan of him, but I read in Donald Trump's book that the biggest problem people face is they don't think big enough, and that is so true. But coming back to actionable steps, I don't think there is specifically steps that I necessarily take. I'm just consciously very much focused to surround myself with the right people. I go to networking events. I'm very conscious about the people that I sort of even spend time with in networking events. And then I pick up people from those networking events that I tend to spend time with in my life. And I'm very, very sort of transparent. I would tell them, look, this is how I think. This is how my values or your values are aligned. This is how we can sort of benefit from each other as a friend, because you always have to not just think of in a selfish way to spend time with someone, but you just have to become a friend with that person as well. Be there for them when they need you, because that's very, very important. If you're not there for them, then it just really becomes selfish as well. So being there for them, and with learning in life, and someone people who are actually into personal growth as well. I don't know how many books do you read, Or do you read at all?
Yeah, I try to read. I try to read a lot. I'm actually reading the Power of Now, by Eckhart Tolle, as
That
we
is a
speaking.
fantastic book. That is an amazing book. But people who are into personal growth, one of the responsibilities every single of that person has is to be able to go and help other people. That's a moral, ethical responsibility. But yeah, it's consciously focusing and choosing the right people to spend time with. I sometimes end up sending messages to people who don't even know me, but I send them a very sort of a genuine message that, look, I see you as someone I look up to, and I want to spend more time with you. Can I grab a coffee with you? You know, and many of the time people just won't reply, and that's okay. You won't find mentors sometimes. You will find mentors sometimes, but it's a part of life to approach those people, because if you don't ask, you don't get. Uh, but yeah, just really, really, really consciously focusing on choosing the people you spend time with. I mean, every single minute. I actually mean every single minute of your life. It's almost impossible for me to really explain that. Even if you have one person in your life that's negative, the effect on your decision making is enormous, and you won't even realize. So it's almost sometimes in your subconscious mind. You may take decisions based on someone who is affecting you negatively without even being aware. And that's very, very important to realize for every single one of us out there, to surround ourselves with the right people. Very, very important.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree. So I want to jump back a little bit more into your history. So you said, I believe, at 19 years old that you went from India to London.
That's right.
Can you talk about what made you decide to venture to London, and then kind of talk through that whole transition? Maybe give some insight into that time period.
Yeah, that's an amazing time period. I remember. Uh, I actually decided to move to. Well, initially I decided to move to Germany, because my brother lives in Germany. He had been there. Uh, well, he's 8 years older than I am, so he had been in Germany 8 years when I was 19 years old. So it was very easy for me to say I'm going to move into Germany, because he was running a sort of a good business at that time. But the purpose was to move to one of the European countries as a family. So not just me, but my brother was already in Germany. We were thinking of moving as a family. But my father said, "You move on, and I will follow you." Uh, so I came to Germany, but then one of the factors was that my parents don't speak, well, neither they speak the Deutsch, which is the German language, neither they speak English. So my brother actually suggested me, it's better if you move to London, because there's actually a bit of Asian population. So if our parents moved to London, it would be easy for them to adjust and integrate, because they'd be able to sort of speak with people here. There's a big sort of Asian community, Afghan and Indian community here that they can speak to. So from there on, I came to London, and it was when I actually moved to London. It's one of the toughest periods in my life, I remember, because I came here, and you know, I initially said to you that I grew up with a culture of sort of a really hardworking father. So I was a sort of a hardworking person, but at the same time, I didn't have a degree. Uh, so when I moved here, uh, I obviously went through many jobs, but I was going through a bit of depression as well, because you come as an immigrant into a country like this, you don't have a degree, you go through different sort of low skilled jobs basically initially. So I was going through a bit of a depression as well, and it's just really, one of the things that I can share with you, and it's a hindsight actually, that when I look back at that period, when one of the purpose of working, basically doing some sort of work in your life, is to stay away from negativity, because when you're focused on working, you don't go and drink, you don't go and do maybe clubbing, or you don't go and spend money on things that you shouldn't be spending money on. So one of the biggest benefits of doing any work and is to stay away from negativity. And at that point, I was doing many. I remember one day I was doing two jobs. So I used to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, be ready by 5:30, get to my first job at 7 o'clock, finish that almost 3 o'clock, come back home 4:30, get ready, have a shower, eat something, go to the next job, which was used to start at 6 o'clock, finish that 11 o'clock at night, go back, have dinner. By the time I used to sleep, it was 12, half 12, be up at 5 o'clock. So going through, something as hard as that, and I did that for about 6 months. And I remember one of the employers that I used to work for, he said, "You can't do that for too long. I can tell you that." And I looked at him and said, I kind of realized that my body is actually telling me that I can't do that for too long. But it was a tough period. And if at any point I'm not actually answering the question and I drift away, do let me know, because sometimes I do drift away. But yeah, it was just one of those times where it's the most that time I remember is the biggest learning time for me in my life. Not just that I really, really worked hard, but I went through many, many failures. So I remember going through different interviews and I didn't get the job. And I used to come back and I used to think, why didn't I get that job? What was it that I didn't get that job? And most of the times I didn't have a clear answer to why I didn't get that job. But when I look at the hindsight, I only have one answer. And that answer will apply to every single person out there who's either looking for a job or looking for a raise in their pay, is your conviction level. It's simply just the conviction level. When you're sitting with someone, when you're actually selling, when you go for an interview, you're selling yourself. When you run a business, you're selling a product, a service, a system. But when you're selling something, selling is nothing more than transfer of conviction from one person to the other. That's all it is. So if you're selling yourself, if you go for a job interview, you really need to transfer that enthusiasm, that conviction level within you to the person you're selling it to. And that's something that I didn't have at that time, because at the back of my mind, I used to think maybe I'm not educated enough. And that's not true. Your education has nothing to do with your success. Your background has nothing to do with your success. Your past has nothing to do with your success. The last minute that went past has nothing to do with your success. Everything is in this present moment. It's not even in your future. So if you're thinking and have a plan for your future, that's good to have, but that has nothing to do with your success. Your success has everything to do with what you do right at this moment of time. And one of the things that I mentor on is, when someone comes to me and they start talking about their past and they start talking about the future plans that they have, I always tell them, look, I cannot mentor you on your past. That's gone. I can't mentor you on your future because it hasn't still arrived yet. What I can mentor you on is at this moment of time. Yes, you can talk about the past, but you still have to talk in the context of how it affects your present. If you want to talk about future, you still have to talk in the context of how it's going to affect your present, because that's only the moment you have. So looking back at that time, this is all hindsight, but that was the time that I was really, really learning all this, obviously in the hardest possible way. And I always recommend everyone that you don't necessarily have to go through the tough time that I went through. You don't have to. You just need to find yourself a mentor, 1, 2 different mentors, maybe in possibly different fields, but you cut your journey by a 10th. So something that has taken me, I've been in business for the past almost 23. I joined my family business at the age of 14. I went through jobs for almost a little over 2 years. So from the age of 14, I'm 37 years old. That's 23 years, and cut the 2 years between. I've been running businesses for the past 21 years. And I can tell you with experience that, it's all that matters is, what is your schedule today? What is it that you did today? And that's all that matters. Yes, learn from the past. Yes, plan your future. But all that matters is that what you did today, that is going to count towards your success. And that's something that I learned at that time, from when I moved here. But I didn't learn it at that time necessarily in this context. It's more hindsight, because I became more of a reflector. I became more of a person who's doing a lot of introspection. So this came from hindsight, but at the same time, the reason for being able to get to that point where you can introspect yourself, when you learn to self-reflect and see how your life is turning out to be, is to be able to go through the tough time. So yes, it's necessary to go through your tough time. Get all the no's possibly before you get a yes. But at the same time, you don't have the time to make all the mistakes in the world. One thing I remember learning from Jim Rohn, and you would probably know Jim Rohn, is the book that you don't read is the book that's going to, I don't remember the exact word, but he says the book that you don't read is the book that's going to hurt you. But the problem is how many books a person can read in the first place. So we don't really have all the time in the world to make the mistakes. So you could possibly, Ben, might have read, let's say, I don't know how many books you've read, 100, 200, 500. I have read over 1,000 books. So if you and me sat together and we had a coffee once a week, you could share your mistakes with me and I don't make them, and I share my mistakes with you and you don't make them. It's almost impossible, the long-term effect of something like that. So having mentors is it's critical to your life. It's almost impossible at this stage. It's almost impossible for me to comprehend not to have a mentor. So yeah, it's just absolutely essential. And you don't necessarily have to have a paid mentor. Find yourself people around you that have been there and done it. Someone who's seen the dark side of how things get really done, how the execution is done. Either you're in a job. I mean, I deal with a lot of executives, and I know the chairmen of a few listed companies. You can find mentors everywhere. And not just learning from mentors, but people around you that someone who started a business, maybe failed the business. That's the biggest learning. So you just need to be conscious enough to observe all these things around you. So not necessarily you go and find yourself a paid mentor. I absolutely recommend that. But be an observer. Be a more consciously focused person. The more aware you are, the more chances you have to not fail. And one of the things that I learned from Brian Tracy is that it's more important not to fail than to succeed in something. Because even if you do a job, and if you know and understand numbers, and you don't fail, so you don't invest somewhere that you lose your capital, you still end up a millionaire if you know how to prudently use your money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does
I like that.
Does that answer the question? Because sometimes I do drift away. So yeah, my apologies for that.
Yeah. Answer that question and a few more. So I'm glad you were expanding on those topics. So I want to talk about that point after you held those jobs. I want to talk about when you went back to the world of entrepreneurship and you started building businesses again, right? And I believe you said that you built about 4 or 5 businesses that all failed or were learning opportunities, right? Can you talk about what those businesses were and some of the biggest takeaways you got from having run and moved on from those businesses?
Yeah, I remember one of the first businesses that I started was a chauffeuring business. I started the chauffeuring business, and to be honest, I didn't have much of sales skills at that point of time. I remember. So one of the takeaways that I can remember from that business is having exceptional sales skills. Regardless of what you do, even if you're in a job, learning to be able to sell yourself and get a raise, that's sales skills. Get sales training. One of the biggest takeaways in my life has been that get as much sales training as you possibly can. So I remember that business didn't necessarily fail. It's just that I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something different. So I kind of had put that business on hold, And what I started doing was I started a music. I remember back in those days, it used to be music CDs and DVDs at that time, and a different kind of DVD. Now it's Blu-ray and all sorts of different things. But at that time, it was CDs. I started selling CDs in markets. Another thing that I started doing was selling ladies' fashion bags in markets. So basically, you have these Saturday and Sunday markets. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that, and something that not a lot of people are even aware of, that you could be running a retail business, making, let's say, let's say a figure. Let's say if you're making £1,000 a week from running a retail shop. I used to run, I used to go to these markets. I used to make, back in those days, I could potentially make £1,000 a day from those markets. So it's something that a lot of people are not even aware of. Now, you might think, well, what sort of entrepreneurialism is that, to be standing in a market and selling something? But I can tell you with experience, that's always the initial stages of majority of the people. If you can do that, because you'll start to learn the sales skills, you start to know how people really take the buying decisions. So the takeaway has been from those businesses is, and I remember from then on, I opened a retail unit as well, where we were selling ladies' bags. And I remember from that unit, which I took, I used to have a girl who used to, do a shift there, and she didn't have sales skills. So I remember, customers walking past her, they'd ask something, but she just didn't know how to sell something. And from then on, I started to learn that, look, regardless of what you do, you got to know how to sell something. I remember in one of my previous jobs that I did for a few days that I left on, that guy actually, I remember, and I was at that time I was a bit ignorant as well. I accept that I'm no more ignorant anymore, But he actually told me that, look, you don't know how to sell something. You need to learn that. But I actually ignored it at that time. I really ignored it. But later on, when I started that, those businesses, some of them they were profitable, but at the same time, they were very sort of difficult to run. So not just that, one has to look at what sort of business you're going into and how profitable that might be. You got to look at your own personality and say, is this the business for me? Is this something that I'm going to enjoy? Because I didn't enjoy many of those businesses. I was running them. Many of them were making good money as well, but I wasn't really enjoying many of those businesses. I remember one day, I was, and this is a fantastic learning lesson for every single person out there. I remember going to the market one day, and I opened the market, and I had the new line of bags, ladies' bags, and I had one girl and me, and this is a very small stall, you might think. And I had so many people surrounding me to buy the stuff that I had to call 2 more people to deal with what was happening, because bags were getting stolen because I couldn't control it. And we were 4 people on a stall of probably 5 by 5 feet. 4 people dealing with something like that. It was crazy. I remember when I packed up, I think that particular day, we had so many bags stolen. It was unimaginable. But it wasn't something that I enjoyed. And takeaways from that is not just that what you're selling, you got to have the sales skills. And if you start an entrepreneurial journey, or if you start a business right now, before you even start, I would recommend you to go and get yourself a sales training program. Either an online program or a face-to-face 2-3 days program. Go and get that. It's almost unimaginable to how that really, really affects the way you deal with people. And what is really sales skills? If you think about it, it's really understanding human nature. Either sales skills or influence skills or leadership skills. All these 3 categories, in my personal experience, has been nothing more than just understanding human nature. It's all about understanding how do people really make decisions. How do they really think about your product? So getting sales training, getting leadership training, absolutely essential. And coming back to those businesses, when I look back at them, another business that I started was catering business. And the funny story about this catering business is that I started the business, I ended up investing 22,000 pounds, and I ran that business for 2 hours, and I closed it. And it's something that I learned from that I don't like getting my hands dirty. So obviously, in the literal form of it, that I don't like cooking something necessarily. I closed that business within 2 hours, lost most of the money. So yeah, it's been one of those journeys. So going from a retail business into a fashion business, going from a music business, going through different businesses, and I realized that I didn't enjoy any of them. So it's really sort of important to find what you love as well. Very important. And when I was writing my book as well, one of the chapters in the book is about, even if you to try, let's say, 10 different businesses or 10 different things to have on your hands on every year, and it takes you 3 or 4 years before you can find something that you like or enjoy doing. You got to do it. You got to do it. Another way to find, and these are all lessons coming from those failed businesses, I normally say, is that look back at your childhood. What is it that you enjoyed? Except watching TV, maybe. But what is it that you really enjoyed? And when I look back at my childhood, some of the things that I enjoyed was, talking with people and observing and watching them. What is it that, how do they take decisions? And that has brought me, and I think one of the essence of starting, being in a business like this is that comes from that. So what is it that you really, really enjoyed as a child when you were in your school? If you enjoyed playing basketball, for example, or you enjoyed playing football, and now you look back at your life, you think, okay, I can't be a player, but you can at least be a part of that. So you can be a commentator, you can be a referee, you can be an administrator behind the scene. Remember, you're going to enjoy, so you're going to progress with it. So it's all about looking at your school years and thinking, okay, what is it that I really enjoyed? And go and be a part of that, because the reason you're going to enjoy is the reason you will progress. So it's really finding your passion. What is it that you really enjoy doing? What is it that you really love doing? And like I said, even if you have to try out 10 different things, and one of the books that I remember about reading about creativity is, and he says, try out different things. If you enjoy climbing, mountain climbing, or if you don't know if you enjoy mountain climbing, go and mountain climb and see if you enjoy it. Go and do skydiving. Go and try out different things, and not just that it increases your creativity. It will help you find what you really, really are passionate about. And remember, and one question that I normally, it's a great question, and I learned it from one of the coaches that I used to have. That what is it that you would do in your life that you still do even if you didn't get paid? What would you do? And if you can answer that question, go and do that, because if you enjoy it, it won't feel like work, and it's just so much more easier to progress in your life. So these are the takeaways, when I look back at those businesses. And what actually happened over a period of time was that, I went through those businesses and I didn't enjoy. I went back to the chauffeuring business. And that's when I got to a point where I mentioned to you that I was suicidal. And I decided that I'm going to make something happen. And I went back to the chauffeuring business. And one thing that I can tell you with experience is, it's almost never the business. It's always the person. It's always the person that makes it successful. If I was to give the same business to two different people, they would both run it completely differently. You would never see two different people running the same business in same ways. They would all both take it in different directions, in different ways of dealing with it. So it's always the person. And So when I went back to the chauffeuring business, it was me. So I realized that it was me that wasn't making it successful. It was the lack of conviction that was in me. And one thing that I did enjoy was I love cars. So chauffeuring business, we used to drive, the S classes and the E classes and the Bentleys and the Rolls Royces. So I enjoyed that. So, you know, I got to a point and I said, I'm going to make this work. And I really, really worked on that chauffeuring business, which I said to you, I sold back in 2014. And we were turning over £1 million, and it was an amazing journey. We used to provide service to Royal Brunei family. We used to provide service to many celebrities. We used to provide service to many listed companies based in London, in the Saudi, in Dubai, in India. So yeah, those are just the learning curves that I've been through.
Absolutely. So, I'm really interested in talking about when you did make that transition.
Oh, the transition, yeah.
From when when you were a little bit less successful, you didn't really know what you wanted to do, and you said you were depressed and you were on the brink of suicide.
Yeah.
What changed in the way that you operated your business? And I know that we were talking about conviction, but technically, how did you build that business up, and what did you do differently, right? So let's provide some real value to the people, and let's give some actionable things that they can do. Yeah, action steps that they can do to take their business up to the $1 million a year pound a month.
Definitely. Let me tell you something. One thing that we did well is, and that applies in different businesses. So there are businesses that you can do this, and there are businesses that you can't do it. So let's say if you're in a business, let's say if you're in a retail business, or let's say if you're in a transport business, when you start that business, you actually are working in the business. You're not working on the business, and it's something that's very sort of important to understand, working in the business and on the business. But when you're running a transport business, or when you're running a retail business, you're working in the business. But that's important to understand, that because you're working in the business, you can make it grow because you're actually there. So when I was in the chauffeuring business, it was me, and I started with 2 drivers. So I had 2 drivers and me, and we were all driving. So I was driving as well. So let's say we started doing a bit of carding. We spread the word out. We did a bit of leaflets. We started to get calls. I went on to some networking events. I gave out cards to some of the executives that I knew. People that was surrounded by. You go and speak to friends, families, people, acquaintances, people, anyone that we knew. We really went and spoke with every single person that I personally knew. We did a lot of carding. But one of the things that was happening was that because I was working in the business, it was paying off for itself. So the marketing budget that we were investing in, it was paying off for itself. The reason being me working in the business. So we were 2 drivers. This is I remember the first day that I started. It was me and the 2 drivers that I recruited, and we started doing carding. The first day there wasn't much business. The second day it picked up a bit, but understanding that your business marketing budget needs to pay for itself. That's where it's very important, because there are businesses where marketing budget doesn't pay for itself. For those businesses, you need front loading. So you do need to have a lot of capital to start with. When I started, I didn't have a lot of capital. I only had a little bit of money that I knew I was going to invest. But it's very important to understand that marketing budget needs to pay for itself, especially when you're working in the business yourself. So I was driving, and then any extra work that was coming, I was giving it to the drivers. We were charging a certain commission on those jobs. But at the same time, I was going through certain training. So I was attending seminars and workshops. I was reading. So I was learning all the sales skills and presentation skills. And I remember one day approaching Virgin Atlantics. And it's funny that when I got to the decision maker, the contract of Virgin Atlantic's chauffeuring has been with one company in London for the past 25 years. And when I got through to the decision maker, she actually said to me on the phone, I remember this, saying, well done for even asking, because in the past 25 years, no one has even asked us for business. And she said that you're not going to get the business, but well done for even getting to a point to ask. And one of the biggest lessons is ask. Until you don't ask, you don't really get to that point. So it's a technical thing to understand that your your marketing budget needs to pay for itself. It's something that a lot of people don't understand. They start a business, they pay for, they have a little bit of capital or they have no capital. They pay for a bit of marketing. Initially, the marketing normally doesn't work. You're more likely going to invest a bit of money in marketing initially, and it's not going to work because you just don't know yet. If you're starting out, it's going to take some time before your marketing really starts to pay off. But if you're working in the business and it's paying off for itself, you can continue that for a much, much longer period of time. So it's something very technical to understand. So yeah, that was one of the basic things that I learned, and just persistent and perseverance. Being consistent with what you do. I used to be up early morning, and even now, I mean, I wake up, not every day, but at least 3 to 4 days a week. I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even earlier than that. So, working hard towards your business is gonna, help you pull off. Anyone who's ever said to you that you're gonna pull off a business very easily has lied to you. That's one in maybe a gazillion businesses that may just pull off without hard work. But it's really gonna take hard work, and I can tell you, from Steve Jobs to anyone that I can really think of, they've all slept in their offices. Elon Musk, even now, he sleeps in his office, and it's hard work. It's hard work, but at the same time, the reward is amazing. It's an amazing feeling when you're running a business and it's doing well, and you're living life on your own terms. You have the time to give to your family. You have the time to do things that you want to do in your life. So it's just a rewarding thing to do, but at the same time, it's a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, it's very sort of important lesson, and I've given, like I said, it's very important to learn sales skills. It's very important to understand how's your prospect thinking, how's your customer thinking. Even if you have to pay to someone, one of your prospects, and say, look, I need 2 hours of yours, I'm going to pay you $200, and I need you to tell me what is it that you are looking when you buy something. It's going to be worth those $200 or £200 that you pay. So, you really, really have to invest in yourself. You really, really have to invest and think creatively. Sitting and reflecting on how you can find different ways to get more exposure without having to pay for it. And that comes from affiliation. For example, go and speak to someone and say, look, I'll recommend you, you recommend me. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Go. Obviously, depending on the business, so whosoever is listening to, depending on the business you're in, go walk into a retail store. Say, you recommend me, and when someone comes to me, I'll recommend you in this area. So in that particular zone, you don't pick up any other retail business in that particular business, and say, I'll recommend you, you recommend me. Simple. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Sometimes understanding your, customer acquisition cost, very, very important. Till you don't get to a point where you don't know your customer acquisition cost, you don't have a business. You are the business yourself till you don't know that. So it's very important to understand customer acquisition cost, and that you can't get there any time easily if you're on a shoestring budget. It will take you 6 to 12 months before you can get there. So when we were in chauffeuring business, depending on the customer, let me switch this off. It's going to make a bit of noise. Understanding your customer acquisition cost is very, very important. So invest time in that. Invest in the systems that when we were running a chauffeuring business, we got to a point where there was a system in place where there was one person in the office, and that person could deal with lots and lots of bookings. There were hundreds of bookings coming in every single day, but the system was dealing with that. So have a system in place where you don't necessarily have to be there for every single minute of your life. At the same time, understand your corporate market depending on the business you're in. The big money is in the corporate market, so it's the people, the large corporations. We used to get majority of our business from large corporations, because an individual can pay you really a limited amount of money in your business. But when you're dealing with a large corporation, it's no personal money. It's not personal money. It's public money. And those are the companies, those are the people that will pay you large sums of money when you start to invoice. So we used to really, really focus. I remember getting to, in my chauffeuring business, where we were focusing really, really on corporate business, because one customer could potentially mean a billing of £200,000, £300,000. And we used to have clients like that. I remember one of our clients, we used to bill in the region of £250,000 a year. And that's just a one client. What would you be prepared to pay to acquire a client that pays you £250,000? The question is, how aware are you? Where are your clients, first of all? And how aware are you on their decision-making process? Stuff like that. So it's very, very important to understand your corporate market. That's where the money is. That's where the big money is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are some really good actionable tips, right? And just to kind of summarize a little bit, you got to go network. You got to go put yourself out there and meet people, and go get some new business. You got to work on your sales skills, whether it be seminars or going to get a course. You got to understand the difference between working in your business versus working on your business, and really figure out when that point of transition is for your own business. And then, again, that was a really good tip that you threw in there about going to look for those big ticket clients, right? Because the effort that it would take you to go land, a Virgin Atlantic, or just for example, that effort, you may spend it getting 5 individual clients, but if you can land that one client, then that's going to pay dividends for a long time. So I guess kind of some of the bigger takeaways are know your market. And customer acquisition costs, and figure out who those big fish are, and go get them. Yeah. Go get them. So that's some great advice. So I wanna talk a little bit about what you're doing presently, right? Because we talked about what your past, got some great value out of that. So thank you for that. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about what your biggest focus is right now?
Okay, so right now, I was telling you that we are in the process of applying for a permission from Westminster Council, which is Central London, the main big council. We've actually applied for permission, and we actually got a reply from them to make some changes to the proposal. But the proposal is really regarding having car park spaces in Central London to park supercars for short-term hire. So while at the same time I'm providing mentoring and consulting to different businesses, but one of the things that I really, really enjoy is cars around me, supercars. And now that I'm out of chauffeuring business, if I do get the permission from Westminster Council, we will have supercars like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, parked up in Central London for a short-term hire. Which means that anyone who is walking past in Central London, that walking, tourist area is very, very high, there's a high footfall area. Anyone walking past could potentially hire a Ferrari for, as little as £100 for 20 minutes. And that's a dream car. I know a lot of men, especially out there, their dream car is a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin or whatever. But I know many people can't really afford to buy these cars, or for that matter, really hire these cars, because in UK, no one does short-term hire. So the shortest period of hire term for a supercar is a day. So if someone was hiring a Ferrari for a day, they would pay between 700 to £1,000 a day, and that's still a lot of money for a lot of people. But imagine if someone wants to drive that car for 20 minutes, all they pay is £100, and they can potentially drive that car. But the deciding factor for execution of this business is really the permission from the Westminster Council. So we are really focused on that permission. But at the same time, I do mentoring, consulting, provide sales and leadership training, and at the same time, I'm into property investment as well. So we buy properties, we either sell them or keep them as investments, stuff like that. So yeah, that's really 3 areas of my focus. I normally recommend people to focus on one thing, because unless you are an experienced person in business, it's a saying that if you try and catch 2 rabbits, you catch none. But that really applies in your initial stages. When you get to a point where you have control and you know what you are really doing, you can. At that time, it's not about catching rabbits; it's all about shooting 2 rabbits with 1 gun. Be first of all, getting to that point where you can actually execute 2 different or 3 different ideas at the same time, but focus on one. But at this moment of time, we are working on 3 different things, you can say.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about your past. We talked about what you're doing now. But what does the future hold for Jack, right? And I'm talking both personally and professionally. What are your goals moving forward?
I remember one thing that I was talking, initially when we started this session, that I was giving a talk the other day in the Confidence Lounge, and I was talking about legacy. And I said to you that I have a daughter as well who's 21 months old. And when I look at my future, for example, one of the things that I really, really sort of, it comes from, it's something not just that I really, really enjoy, but it comes from heart. It's something that you really do with all your heart, is to leave a legacy, to be able to leave something for people to take away. When they look up to you, someone to look up to. Let's put it this way. And it's funny that I was having a conversation with my nephew this morning, and he actually called me up, and he actually said to me that you're one person that I look up to. So being able to leave a legacy, and that's not really coming from a selfish point of view or anything. It's just being able to, it's like I remember looking at this book, and I haven't read the book, but the title of the book was "Who Would Cry When You Die?" And I think it's a book written by Robin Sharma. And I'm pretty sure the essence is really leaving a legacy, being able to, it's like you and me talking about Jim Rohn. I've learned so much from Jim Rohn, and I don't know if you know Dr. Wayne Dyer. Dr. Wayne Dyer is someone that, he passed away like a few months ago. He was one of the teachers, spiritual teachers that I used to look up to. And I remember the day he passed away, I really, really, really cried. Like, I'd never met him. All I did was I watched his work and I read all his books. But I really, really cried. Someone you've never met and you can cry for that person is amazing. It's an amazing thing. So the future for me is being able to leave a legacy where people, and I don't mean a lot of people, as many people as I can get to in my life, where I can leave my learning, what I've learned in my own life, and say, look, this is what I've learned. This is what will benefit you. And if they can, it's just a feeling. It's just a feeling and nothing else. So being able to leave a legacy. And at the same time, and I talked about my daughter, becoming a father that your kids look up to. She would grow up and she'd look at my life and say, okay, my father did the best that he could for me and for our family. Someone that she could look up to, someone she could go back to the work that he's done and read the books that I'm writing, or read the books that I maybe read and they're on the shelf, and say, look, this is something that I got as from a father that I learned. That's something that I'm really sort of inclined towards. Uh, so I do give out talks every now and then about leaving a legacy, um, and how I dealt with depression and going through a point of suicide, and being able to come out of it. Um, and if anyone out there who's watching this and listening to this, there's always hope. There's always a bright side to everything in life. It's just your perspective if you can see that. And I can assure you there is a bright side to everything in life. Even the hardest of the times that you're going through, there is something that's there for you to learn and look up to. So don't lose heart. So yeah, future for me is give as many talks out there as possible. I actually have applied for a TEDx talk as well. Hopefully, if I can get in. I give out talks to universities as well on leaving a legacy, and this is really the personal side. I'm a deeply spiritual person. So I believe there is a God. I believe I don't believe necessarily in a religion, but I believe there is a God, and I believe there is a reason why we do what we do in our life. There's a reason. Everything happens for a reason. I believe in that. And when it comes to professional future of me, I think it's all about one thing that I would love to do, and I still haven't done it yet in my life, but I'd love to do, and I will do it in my life, is to be able to create something that, being more innovative, being more creative with the work that we do. Someone that I look up to is Elon Musk, for example. Someone who can go and start a car company and a rocket company, a space company. It's amazing. Someone who's never learned science and goes on to start a space company. It's amazing. It's someone everyone can look up to, and I would love to get to that point where I can create something to leave in this world to be remembered for. I'd love to be able to get to that point, but I'm not at that point in my life. But yeah, I'm sure that I will get to that point.
That's fantastic, man. So I just have a few more questions for you. It's been a great interview. I really do appreciate your time. But if you could go back to any time period, which time period would you go back to, and why?
In what context? In what aspect are you asking that?
Just to go back to any time period, whether it be the dinosaurs or the 20s, the 30s. Where would you want to go back to? What period of time in history would you want to go back to?
I think I would want to go back to 1800s. I think the reason being, maybe it's melodramatic of what I'm about to tell you, but it's funny that I'm actually one of those people who likes living. I would love to live in a village where everyone knows everyone, and everyone is like a family. But that doesn't really happen anymore in most of the parts of the world. So being able to live in a village where literally every person is a family, and everyone goes out to help each other. It's not about financial profits anymore. It's all about helping each other. I love to be able to live like that. So being able to get to go to 1800s and live in maybe an Indian village where everyone just knew everyone and everyone would help everyone, and money was not the aim of the life really of what's really happening in the urban life in this day and age. Being able to live a life like that, I think it would be really it's sort of a satisfying life, a very satisfactory life. Internal satisfaction is what I call it. It's something that I would get from that. But yeah, if there was a time machine, I would probably buy it and do that.
Awesome. So if you could go back, either past or present, and speak to one person, who would that person be?
Ooh. If I could go back in time, if I could speak to just one person, that would by far, and just one person, is Dr. Wayne Dyer. I remember when I was reading the work of Dr. Wayne Dyer. I was this was only 3 years ago that I got into his work, and I was reading some of his books, and I watched a few documentaries and videos. But then I was getting to a point where I was thinking, I'm gonna go and see him in one of the seminars or workshops, and I will personally go and see him, and I will tell him how it affected really my life, and how much has changed within me when I was reading his work. But before that, he passed away. I didn't even know that he was going through any physical problems. But yeah, he passed away. And if I could go back, I would go and speak to him. And one question that I would really ask him is, what made him into the person that he was? What made him the person that he was? And it's something that I might be able to get from his work. I might not. I don't know yet. I haven't completed all his work. But one of the things that I decided when he passed away was that I will complete all his work. So I will read all his books. He's written something like 60 plus books throughout his life, and all of them have been bestsellers. Not necessarily in the context of economic, financial terms of bestsellers, but bestsellers in the terms of how people have learned from it. So I decided that I will read all his work, and I will give a talk in either Cambridge or Oxford University about all his work by 2020. By 2020. So anything that I normally decide, I just put a date on it, then it gets done. So by 2020, I've decided to read all his work and give a talk on his work about how he went on to be the person that he became. So yeah, that's one person that I really look up to.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So,
yeah.
if you were to describe yourself to somebody else, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we wear a ton of different hats. How would you describe yourself to another person?
Personally or professionally?
Either one.
Personally, let's say professionally first. Professionally, one of the aspects of me is, and that's just one aspect in my professional side, is that I help entrepreneurs and multinationals. And I was actually writing this a couple of days ago, that I help entrepreneurs and multinationals to have more exposure and improve their bottom line by mentoring and sales and leadership training. So this is one of the, so if you ever get an email from me or my team, this is a line that you would see right at the top or maybe at the bottom of the email, saying we help entrepreneurs and multinationals get more exposure and improve their bottom line by mentoring and sales and leadership training. So yeah, this is one of the aspects of my professional side. Another aspect of my professional side is that I love cars, and you would always see me, doing something or the other in car business. So you'd see me driving Ferraris, and I actually drove a Ferrari just a few months ago. It's an amazing feeling when you're driving that piece of engineering. So that's my professional side. On the personal side, to be honest, I've never thought about it. But if I was to think and say, okay, personally, I'm a very deeply spiritual person. I think everything happens for a reason. So either the negative or the positive that's happening in our life happens for a reason. So if you're going through a tough time, hold on, man. Hold on. You're going to get there. There's always light. There's always a bright side. So personally, me, I can always see the bright side. I can always see the bright side, regardless of the situation. I mean, I could be in the most toughest possible situation. I can always see the bright side. And that comes with practice. That just comes with practice. And, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. And I believe in myself. I believe that I can make things happen. I could be sitting on a dust. The question is, do you believe in yourself to turn it into gold? There's a metaphor. There's actually a word for it called, turning lead into gold. Alchemist, the alchemist. Have you become an alchemist? That's the question. And it's a question that I ask myself. Can I turn dust into gold? I'm becoming that person. So that's me personally. I'm slowly and surely becoming a person that can turn anything into gold. And I will.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's me.
So I have two more questions for you.
Go
Again, I
ahead.
really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The first one is, if you had to be an animal, what animal would you be and why?
I've always been a tiger. It was a simple question for me to answer. But I've always been a tiger, not a lion, a tiger. The reason being, tigers normally hunt and do the hard work to do the hunting. So I can hunt, but I always end up doing a lot of hard work for it. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And the last question I have for you today, Jack, is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Before I even answer this question, let me compliment you on your questioning skills. Not many people have the questioning skills you have, Ben. So yeah, thank you for that, because it's the questions that dig the answers from our subconscious side of our mind. So anything that you haven't covered, you've covered a lot. You've covered major ground there. Big parts of the book that I've written, majority of the lessons that I've learned, actually the major lessons, not the minor lessons. Sometimes the minor lessons make a big difference as well. Obviously, we don't have the time to go into the minor lessons, but minor lessons do make a big difference in the way you make decisions in your life. But one thing that you haven't covered, I think you haven't covered in detail, one question that you haven't covered, although we have covered it, but not covered in detail, is the bigger vision. Bigger vision. How big are you thinking? How big, anyone who's watching this, how big are you thinking? And I don't just mean thinking big and not taking action, equivalent action. So the next decision that you're taking, whoever is watching this, the next decision that you're taking, does that start from 1 million? Does that start from 10 million? Does that start from 100 million? Where does it start from? Because where it starts from is where it will end. And a lot of people actually think, okay, I'm going to start and say, I'm going to take my business to £1 million or 10 million pound, but they don't. They get overwhelmed with it. They don't break it down. So not just having a bigger vision and taking equivalent action, courageous action. At the same time, understanding how to break it down into smaller steps, not getting overwhelmed looking at how am I going to reach a revenue of £1 million. £1 million divided by 365 is what figure? Divide that by every hour of the day. Divide that by every minute of the day. Make it easier for yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself. So just thinking bigger doesn't mean that you really get harsh on yourself. It's very important to think big. At the same time, it's very important to be able to take equivalent amount of action. At the same time, understanding to break it down. At the same time, understanding that you can never ever do £1 million revenue by yourself. You need a team. You're just a one person. You can never ever turn £1 million on your own, unless you're sitting on a unicorn like WhatsApp, for example, doing multi-millions without having to have a big team. That's exceptional. But you need a team. You need to be able to learn how to lead a team. You need to be able to learn how to deal with people, what inspires them. So that's an essential component of being able to start a business, scale a business. You can never ever get to a point where people say that there's a term which says, self-made millionaire. There's no self-made millionaire. You don't make millions just on your own. You make it with a team. So at the same time, while you have a big vision and you're breaking it down and not getting overwhelmed, taking enough action, you need a team. You need to be able to know how to lead your team. You need to be able to learn what inspires them. You need to be morally strong to share your profits with them, because if you don't share your profits with them, they won't be inspired. Money is not just one form of something that inspires people, but there are obviously different forms, but money is just a one form as well. Money does inspire people. So being able to share your profits with people, absolutely essential. Stick to your word when you're thinking big. The biggest thing is stick to your word, because you will never get to that point if you don't stick to your word, even if you have to lose money for it. Even if you have to, and I can tell you, not one, but so many times that I've given a word and I've lost money for it, but I stick to it. Because in transport business, one of the things that we used to deal with was, you take a booking, it doesn't pay you well, but you still take the booking because you still have to get the wheels rolling. But then you get another booking, which pays you 10 times more, but you've got yourself committed. You don't take that booking because you can't afford to, go back on your word. So stick to your word, because that proves that you have integrity. It's very important. Otherwise, you will just never get there. A lot of people struggle with all this. They don't get there. Understanding how business can be scaled is not just organically, but non-organically. So being able to buy businesses, understanding how you can buy businesses out. When I was scaling business, I actually ended up buying a business which we integrated into the existing business that we had. So understanding all these things, very important. Sometimes you can't grow organically. There's no market, maybe. Maybe it's just too competitive. How can you buy out a business and scale it? Things like that's very, very important. So, maybe you have a vision saying, I want to reach 10 million figure in revenue. You may not be able to get there organically. You may have to buy out businesses. Understanding how you can buy businesses without having to put down any money upfront. These are all sort of very simple but effective tactics when it comes to having a bigger vision and being able to grow. Something that you didn't cover, and I wanted to share that. So it's very, very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Jack, again, I want to thank you so much for the time that you've spent and the value that you've provided and all the stuff that you shared. It was very powerful. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I hope you took away some points there.
Absolutely.
I just hope that. I don't know.
Absolutely. And to everybody who's listening, I want to thank you as well, because y'all are the reason that we do this. And if we can make but a positive impact in your life, then this whole thing is worth it. So I want to thank you for listening.
That's right. If there's anything that you can take away from today, then it's all been worth it.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Ben, for having me. Thank you for everyone listening out there. If there's anything that I can help you with, follow my social media. I always put content out there that can help you out, be more effective, be more productive with your life, with your business. I'm always there to help you out. I'd be more than happy to, if you have any questions, you can just throw on my any of my social media network. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. So yeah, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack. And again, thank you to everybody listening. This has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Jack Dawhra from Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.